They've got 15 years of experience at top-tier firms. They have managed massive budgets. They've seen every single cycle the market has to offer. And your instinct, and be honest with yourself here, your instinct is to say, hire them immediately.
Because this person is a master of their craft.
Yes, they are the safe bet.
That is the instinct, yeah. It's called the tenure bias. It is the standard operating procedure for, well, almost every hiring manager on the planet. And frankly, it's comforting.
It is comforting. It feels safe. But what if I told you that the whole years of experience metric you're looking at is actually lying to you? What if that 15 years of experience isn't an asset, but a massive blinking liability?
It's a very provocative thought to start with. But when you look at the data we have today, it's really the only question that matters. Are you hiring mastery? Or are you hiring what the actuaries call a stagnation signature?
A stagnation signature. Oof.
I know.
That sounds ominous. That sounds like some kind of medical diagnosis you really do not want to get. And that is exactly where we are going today on this deep dive.
We are tearing up the standard HR playbook.
We really are. The one all about culture fit and soft skills. We're tearing that up and replacing it with something much colder, which is actuarial science.
Right. We're moving from people skills to physics. Today, we're digging into a fascinating set of documents from the stability engine.
Yes. Specifically, we have two reports here. One is titled Skill Velocity Delta and the Architecture of Legacy Shock. And the other is the Skill Velocity Delta and Technical Obsolescence Risk.
And legacy shock is just a fantastic term.
I love that term. It sounds like a sci-fi thriller. But our mission for this deep dive is to figure out why your safest hires, the ones with those perfect heavy resumes, are quitting in 9 months. And honestly, why your own career might be decaying faster than you think.
Exactly. It's about predicting the future of a hire based on the velocity of their past. And to do that, we have to stop looking at static weight and start looking at speed.
So let's start with the baseline, the environment we are all swimming in right now. Because none of these metrics matter if the world isn't changing.
Right.
But the sources cite a specific number from the World Economic Forum that honestly it kind of terrified me when I read it.
You're talking about the 4.2 years?
Yes, the 4.2-year half-life. Break that down for us because, half-life is usually something we talk about with radioactive isotopes, not career skills.
It fits perfectly here, though. A half-life of 4.2 years means that if you learned a cutting-edge software stack or a new management methodology or, I don't know, a digital marketing framework today,
Right.
in 4 years and 2 months, half of that knowledge is effectively useless. It's completely obsolete.
That is incredibly fast. That is not a generation. That is a fraction of a career.
Yeah.
I mean, if I go to college for 4 years, by the time I graduate, the stuff I learned freshman year is already half rotten.
Precisely. And that decay rate is accelerating. The report suggests that in high-tech sectors, it's even lower. It's closer to 2.5 years.
Wow, 2.5.
Yeah. So consider the friction this creates. You're looking at that candidate we mentioned earlier, right? The one with 10 years of experience. The traditional view says, wow, 10 years of wisdom, they've seen it all.
But the actuarial view, based on these stability engine reports, asks a totally different question.
It does. The actuarial view asks, is that 10 years of continuous evolution? Or is that 1 year of experience repeated 10 times?
Oh man, 1 year of experience repeated 10 times, that hits hard.
It's the difference between tenure and trajectory. The source material argues that most boards and most hiring managers, they audit for tenure. They look for stability. They say, oh, they stayed at this company for 6 years. That's great.
Right, that's loyalty.
Exactly, loyalty. But the stability engine suggests we should actually be auditing the rate of decay.
So instead of asking how long were you there, we should be asking how fast are you rotting?
Well, that's a brutal way to put it, but yes.
Well, I try.
It's true, though. If a professional has a decade of tenure but hasn't updated their skills, their experience is effectively decaying. They are becoming less valuable every single day they sit in that seat, even if their title sounds incredibly important.
Which brings us to the core metric of this whole deep dive, the skill velocity delta. It sounds super complex, but delta just means change, right?
Right. Delta is simply the rate of change. So this metric analyzes the rate of change in a candidate's technical stack across their entire career trajectory. It's quantifying their learning momentum.
Learning momentum. I really like that phrase. It suggests that your career has physics. It's moving. It has speed. It's not just some static list of bullet points on a LinkedIn profile.
It absolutely has physics, and this isn't just a vibe check, you know. The source material gives us specific, hard numbers to classify talent based on this exact momentum. They divide candidates into two very distinct buckets: evolving assets and stagnating assets.
Okay, let's get into those numbers,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of people listening might want to mentally audit themselves right now. What actually makes someone an evolving asset?
According to the Stability Engine audit scripts, an evolving asset is a candidate who adds more than 30% new modern skills to their profile every 24 months.
30% every 2 years.
Yes, that is a high bar.
That is a wildly high bar. That means if I have, say, 10 core skills I use to do my job today, in 2 years, 3 of them need to be completely new or significantly modernized.
Exactly. And let's be really clear what new means here. It doesn't mean you learned how to use the new coffee machine in the break room.
Right, or a new chat app.
Exactly. It means significant toolset upgrades. So if you were a marketer, 2 years ago you were heavily focused on SEO keywords and basic analytics. Today, to hit that 30% mark, you need to be proficient in AI-driven content generation, maybe programmatic ad buying, and advanced data visualization.
So if my daily workflow looks exactly the same today as it did in 2022, I am definitely not an evolving asset.
You are definitely not. And the sources call the people who are hitting that 30% mark high-velocity assets. These are the people who are actually capable of driving transformation. They aren't just doing the job, they're rewriting how the job is done because they are constantly ingesting new tools.
Okay, so that's the gold standard, the evolving asset. What is the flip side? What exactly is a stagnating asset?
The definition there is candidates clinging to legacy stacks with less than 10% skill acquisition over that same 24-month period.
Less than 10%. So they're basically doing the exact same thing they were doing 2 years ago.
And likely the same thing they were doing 4 years ago. The text specifically describes these candidates as high-risk allocations in a high-growth environment.
See, that is the part that feels so counterintuitive to me. Usually we think of the person who changes things up constantly as the risk, the cowboy.
Right.
And the person who just stays the same, head down, doing the work, as the safe bet. But this data is flipping that entirely on his head.
It completely inverts the traditional logic. In a world where the half-life of skills is 4.2 years, stability, at least in the sense of not changing, is actually dangerous. It is stagnation. If you hire someone who hasn't learned anything new in 5 years, you are hiring someone who is technically obsolete. You're essentially buying a machine that cannot run modern software.
Oh, man. It's like buying a computer that was absolutely top of the line 5 years ago, but it has never had a single software update.
Yes.
It turns on, screen lights up, the keyboard works, but the second you try to install a modern app, it just crashes.
That is the perfect analogy. And the metric, the skill velocity delta, is just trying to measure that update frequency. It is quantifying adaptability. High velocity means resilience. It means when the market shifts, this person shifts right along with it. Stagnation means brittleness.
So we have these metrics. We have the evolving asset, which is the sprinter, and the stagnating asset, which is basically a statue. Now, here is where the plot really thickens. Because the sources talk about a very specific disaster scenario. What happens when you mix them up? Because companies do this all the time, don't they?
They do it constantly, and this is the most critical part of the analysis for anyone in leadership right now. This introduces the concept of legacy shock, and the report identifies legacy shock as the #1 driver of voluntary attrition for elite technical leaders.
Number one, really, more than bad bosses, more than low pay.
The source is explicit on this. It is not compensation. You cannot pay your way out of legacy shock. You can give them huge stock options. You can give them a massive corner office. It does not matter.
Okay, so what is it then? Walk us through the actual mechanism of legacy shock.
Legacy shock happens when a high-velocity talent, that person who is adding 30% new skills every 2 years, joins an organization with low technical maturity, an organization with high legacy debt.
So you take a Ferrari engine, precision engineered, super high RPM, and you drop it into a rusted out farm tractor.
And you expect it to win a Formula One race. The friction, according to the report, is immediate. The candidate walks in, they are ready to run at their natural speed, which is fast, agile, constantly iterating, and they just hit a massive wall.
Bureaucracy.
Bureaucracy, outdated systems, people saying, oh, we need 3 signatures to change that font, or we don't use that software here, it's too new.
I can honestly feel that frustration just hearing you describe it,
Yeah.
because it's not just a minor annoyance, right? It's an actual inability to function.
Exactly. The source says the candidate realizes they cannot execute at their natural speed. Think about that specific phrasing. It's a violation of their professional nature. They generate heat, they generate friction, they are trying to sprint in quicksand.
And I assume the organization doesn't just sit back and pleasantly let them change things.
Oh, absolutely not. The organization has an immune system. The stagnating assets inside the company look at this high-velocity person and see a massive threat. They view them as disruptive or chaotic, or they use that classic line, they aren't a culture fit.
So the Ferrari driver gets tired of driving the tractor. Do they stick around to try and fix it?
They do not. The actuarial modeling shows that this mismatch triggers an exit signal as early as month 9.
Month 9.
Month 9.
That is barely enough time to figure out where the bathrooms are and get your IT logins sorted in some of these big companies.
Exactly. And think about the traditional recruitment process for a C-level or a VP-level leader. It takes 3 months just to find them, 3 months to interview them, months to negotiate the package. And then, less than a year later, they are walking out the door.
That is an absolute disaster for the business.
It really is. And the Stability Engine code actually applies risk multipliers specifically for this exact type of mismatch. Because it's predictable, it's not a surprise, it's just math. If delta A, the person, is significantly higher than delta B, the company, the bond breaks.
So if it's predictable math, why do companies keep doing it? Because I see this all the time. A dusty old school legacy company says, we need to innovate. We need to be like a tech startup.
Right.
So they go out and they hire some hotshot from a big tech firm or a cutting edge lab. They pay them an absolute fortune. And they sit back and think they've solved the problem.
They think they've bought a solution, but they have actually just bought a crisis. They think innovation is a person. They think if we buy the Ferrari driver, our bus will magically become a Ferrari, but the bus is still a bus.
And that mistake has a massive price tag attached to it. The source material explicitly calls this the $1.3 million mistake.
Let's unpack that price tag, because $1.3 million seems really high for a single bad hire. Where does that come from?
Well, it's the aggregate cost. You have the executive search firm fees, which is usually 30% of the first year's salary right out the door. You have the sign-on bonus, the equity grants, the onboarding costs, the salary for those 9 months where they were just fighting the tractor.
Right.
But then you also have the disruption cost of the exit itself and the cost of having to start the entire search all over again.
And don't forget the reputational damage. That high-velocity person goes back to their network, which, by the way, is full of other high-velocity people, and says, do not go there. It is a dinosaur. It is where careers go to die.
Yeah, he's totally poisoned the well.
Precisely. But the key insight here, and honestly, this was the big aha moment for me in reading the text, is how the audit rules the specific situation.
How so? What does the audit say?
The text says mismatched velocity is a pre-hire hazard, not a post-hire performance issue.
Oh, wow. That is a crucial distinction.
It changes everything. Usually, when a new hire quits in 9 months, the company blames the hire. They say, oh, they just weren't a good culture fit, or they couldn't handle the complexity of our business. But this actuarial approach says, no, the error happened before the contract was even signed.
The error was the match itself.
Correct. If you hire a high-velocity leader to manage a low-maturity stack without a very clear plan, the source says you are essentially paying for a $1.3 million resignation letter. You have guaranteed their failure from day one.
Okay, so is there any way to make it work? Or should old-school companies just never hire high-velocity people? Because that seems really depressing. Does a legacy company just have to accept its fate and only hire slow people?
That's the path to a slow death, right? But no, there is one exception mentioned in the text. One specific configuration where this mismatched pairing can actually work. A high-velocity hire in a legacy environment only works if there's a clear transformation mandate.
A transformation mandate. Okay, that sounds a bit like corporate buzzword bingo. What does a transformation mandate actually look like in practice?
It means the organization knows it's a tractor, it admits it's a tractor, and it is hiring the Ferrari driver specifically to take the tractor apart and build a race car. And this is the absolute key. They actually give them the wrench.
Right. It can't just be, hey, come in and be super innovative, but please don't change any of our existing processes.
Exactly. They need authority. They need a massive budget. And the leadership needs to expect friction. When the high-velocity hire starts breaking things and upsetting the stagnating assets, the leadership needs to say, good. That is exactly what we paid them for.
If the mandate is maintain the status quo, but just do it a little bit better, the high-velocity asset will leave.
Every single time. If the mandate is brand the status quo down and build something completely new, they might stay. They need the friction to be actionable, not structural.
This whole concept really shifts how we should think about burnout, doesn't it? We tend to think burnout just comes from working too many hours. But this suggests burnout actually comes from drag, from being slowed down.
That's a brilliant way to put it. It's the difference between running a marathon and trying to run a marathon underwater.
Yeah.
The distance is exactly the same, but the resistance is suffocating. If you are a high-velocity learner stuck in a stagnation environment, you are burning so much energy just trying to suppress your natural instincts. That is exhausted energy.
And conversely, if you are a stagnating asset, if you haven't learned anything new in 5 years and you somehow managed to land a job at a high-velocity company.
You are going to drown immediately.
Right.
The source describes that as a completely different kind of shock. You'll be overwhelmed by the tool chain, the pace of decision-making, the expectation of autonomy. You'll become a bottleneck within a week.
So the goal here is alignment. You absolutely need to match the velocity of the talent to the velocity of the environment.
Or consciously choose to change the velocity of the environment. But you have to be totally honest about the variables. You simply cannot fake velocity.
You cannot fake velocity. That's a great line. Looking at this source material, specifically the stability engine reports, it's really fascinating how they view humans almost like software code bases.
It can feel a little cold, right? Calling people assets or liabilities, talking about decay rates. It feels like we're discussing machinery, not human beings with families and dreams.
It does. But does that coldness actually serve a purpose here?
The source argues that this coldness is actually much more respectful of the talent than the traditional warm and fuzzy HR approach.
How so?
Because it acknowledges that a skilled professional has a need for growth that is as real and as vital as a machine's need for power. If you cut the power, if you block the growth, the machine stops. It validates the need for learning. It says learning isn't just a nice-to-have perk like free coffee in the break room. It is the fuel that keeps the asset from decaying.
So it stops treating attrition as this emotional mystery. Like, why did they leave? We gave them a ping pong table. And it treats it like an engineering problem. We put a high voltage part in a low voltage circuit and it blew the fuse.
Precisely. And for you, the listener, that's incredibly empowering. If you're feeling deeply frustrated in your current role, maybe it's not because you're difficult or hard to work with. Maybe it's literally just physics. You have a high skill velocity delta and you're trapped in a low velocity environment. It's just a mismatch.
So let's wrap this up and look at the big takeaways. We've covered the decay, the definitions, the shock, and the massive financial cost. If we distill this down for you, whether you are hiring someone tomorrow or you're looking to get hired yourself, what do you need to remember?
I'd say there are three main things to really lock in from these reports.
First up, the clock.
Right. Respect the clock. Skills decay. The half-life is 4.2 years. If you are resting on your laurels from 2020, you are already in serious trouble. The market is moving much faster than you think. You need to audit your own skills today.
Second, the classification. Know your velocity.
You are either an evolving asset or a stagnating asset. The metric is brutal but clear. Are you adding 30% new skills every 2 years? If you're under 10%, you are accruing risk. You are becoming a quote-unquote safe hire that is actually a ticking time bomb of obsolescence.
And third, the crash. Avoid legacy shock.
Don't put the Ferrari in the tractor. If you are a hiring manager, stop trying to solve deeply embedded cultural problems with a single-star hire, unless you are truly ready to let them break things.